Brothers and sisters, peace be upon you. I will start with the following land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe and Potawatomi and Adawa peoples. We recognize the crimes that were committed against the indigenous people of the land when it was colonized by European forces and bandits. We recognize the pain and betrayal the indigenous people have felt when the US government abrogated several treaties with the Indian tribes. We recognize their enduring connection to this territory and express respect for their resistance. As immigrants to this land, now known as Michigan, we honor the histories and cultures of the indigenous peoples across all occupied land, past and present, and pledge that we will stand with the oppressed and fight against occupation and ethnic cleansing and genocide everywhere and every time till peace pervades earth. Disclaimer: this event serves as a neutral platform for all the exchange of ideas, discussions, and engagement on the topics of public interest. It's not intended to promote, endorse, or support any specific political candidate or party. The information shared during this event is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement or recommendation of any political candidate, party, or campaign. The sponsors of this event are committed to maintaining a non-partisan stance and fostering an environment where diverse viewpoints can be expressed and respected. The speakers in this event, including myself, do not necessarily speak on behalf of any of the sponsors or organizers. They only speak on behalf of themselves. We have sent an email to all presidential candidates to speak at this event and open the door for them to come at any time after this event to express their own point of view. We would like to thank all the sponsors listed on the event invitation. If you want to see a recording of this event afterwards, please, you will find it at dearbornblog.com. Our government is filled today with what can be seen as war criminals. Every wall is tainted with blood of children. What more can we say and what more can we do? There's so much that we are doing and so much that we can do, but the minimum we can today as Americans is becoming clear about one thing. As Caitlin Johnston puts it, a political party which views opposing an active genocide as a fringe extremist position is not a political party that should continue to exist. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and this is my opinion, have committed war crimes that no longer allows us the possibility of considering working in or with such parties. A party whose 100% of senators vote against ceasefire, I can't see it except as an evil act. You vote against ceasefire, and then you go sleep at night knowing that your vote is literally killing children that night. How can you sleep? Many of us didn't know that America is a multi-party country, and there are more than 2 parties in the country. No matter how much is that fact suppressed. Today, we are honored to have with us the Green Party presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein, who has been a very strong and vocal voice for immediate ceasefire and a voice for justice and peace in the world, as Green Party is well known to represent everywhere around the globe. We are going to hear from her today, and then we will have a question and answer session open with you. But first, I would like to open this evening with a word of welcome by Imam Ilahi, who has generously opened the Islamic House of Wisdom for this event. And if you know Imam Ilahi, you know he is a man who has been fighting for peace, justice, coexistence, and love all his life. Since I have known him back in the early 90s, Imam Ilahi has been a voice of wisdom and justice, bringing people together, bringing faiths together, giving the best advice to the American administration, and being a voice of justice and peace around the world. He and the Board of Islamic House of Wisdom has made this center a center for social justice and peace. And there is no better place to be tonight fighting injustice and genocide than in this house of wisdom, this house of God. Help me welcome Imam Ilahi.
Salam wa rahmah, peace and blessing, and thank you, Hajj Wissam, for your generous words and also beautiful presentation. It is a great honor to welcome Dr. Jill Stein, a great lady, a great leader with a great journey, a journey of justice and rejection and fighting against injustice, oppression, occupation, and arrogance. She is traveling, speaking, working hard, tirelessly, since this genocide started in Gaza. Obviously, this started 76 years ago. Genocide and ethnic cleansing and hatred and racism. But in the last 5-6 months, it's been the worst of the last 76 years. So we have witnessing this genocide in Gaza in a sense of a military genocide, very brutal, undescribable, horrific, so barbarian, but also we see a moral genocide, the military genocide in Gaza, and the moral genocide in the White House. And that moral genocide called hypocrisy and double standards.
Logical wisdom, social justice, grassroots democracy, non-violence, community-based economics, and global responsibility. And the more important question, which I'm sure if Dr. Stein doesn't address in her talk, I'm sure she's going to be asked about that. As we have seen with other parties, does the Green Party stand behind these values? And do they have the track record of it? I can say they do have the track record, and we'll hear more from Dr. Stein. Thank you for coming to Dearborn Heights, and welcome to the stage, Dr. Stein.
Thank you, Wissam. Thank you so much, Imam Ilahi, for your beautiful and inspiring words. And it is an inspiration to be here in Dearborn. So many of us have looked to Dearborn for your courage, for your moral vision, for your really elevating the hope and the vision of the nation in this very precarious, urgent moment when we are watching a genocide roll out on our iPhones and our TVs and our computer screens in incredible detail. And as America becomes aware that this is blood on our hands, We are not simply accomplices. We are full partners in this genocide that the United States, with our tax dollars, is providing 80% of the weapons here, the weapons and the bombs and the missiles, the aircraft that are delivering them. We have basically sold or given to Israel with the billions of dollars that we have provided every year for decades, and currently that's at some $3.5 billion or maybe a little bit more than that every year. And right now, in the midst of this genocide, our Congress, with the support of the White House, is trying to appropriate another $17 billion, not just to continue this genocide, but also to expand a war in the Middle East that is taking place in order to protect Israel's right, supposedly, to conduct this genocide. This is not only, this is madness. This is evil personified. This is the slaughter of potentially 2.2 million people. This is also a risk to every Israeli in the area, as well as Israel is making itself a pariah among nations and incurring the hostility and the wrath and reversing whatever progress was being made towards reconciliation with its neighbors. That is all gone. And we're looking at actually the U.S. bombing 4 countries now: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and bombing Iranian targets, although not yet Iran itself, although I think Israel is conducting operations inside Iran. But we're potentially provoking such military pushback against Israel, provoking the igniting of conflict here throughout the Middle East at a time when Iran has recently established a military alliance with Russia. So we have the complexity of a World War I type situation, a tinderbox, with the difference that there are now nuclear weapons involved, not only the weapons that Israel has illegally against international treaties, the US as a nuclear power, but potentially Russia as a nuclear power. So, it's very important for all of us here in this country to know that we too are in the target hairs, because any war that could go nuclear potentially involves all of us. And just one piece of background on that Americans should know but don't know, that our criminal leadership should know but they don't know and don't care about. Just one nuclear-armed submarine carries the equivalent of 4,000 Hiroshima bombs. What could 4,000 Hiroshima bombs do? They could put us all into what's called nuclear winter. Is that a familiar term to anybody? Yeah, what it says is that in a nuclear explosion, so much debris is kicked up and injected into the upper atmosphere that it doesn't just settle down. It stays there for years. And what it does is reduce sunlight and block agricultural production. So it's as if it's winter time all over the world when things do not grow. You do not produce food. That is one of many dangers of nuclear explosions. And just one nuclear submarine worth of nuclear explosions is enough to basically starve at least half of the world's population with the reduction in food. And this is well established by nuclear scientists. This is not really subject to question. This is one of those risks of nuclear war. This is why nuclear weapons should not exist whatsoever. They should be abolished. The United States is one of those nuclear powers that has been fighting against a treaty that has now been signed by a majority ignorant and aggressive and domineering fashion. But the bottom line here right now is that this war is dangerous to all of us. Not to mention that the US war machine costs us about half of the congressional budget right now. It's about $1 trillion per year. If you include, and that's just for the Pentagon, if you include the many other aspects of war and our so-called security state, like Homeland Security or the FBI or the CIA, the Department of State, the nuclear weapons, which are not on the Pentagon budget, if you add all this stuff up, including the cost of caring for wounded soldiers and the costs of the Veterans Administration, it's more like $1.5 trillion per year, more than half of our congressional budget. And at a time when child poverty has doubled in the last year or two, at a time when half of Americans who rent their homes are seriously financially stressed, just keeping a roof over their heads right now. Half of renters meet the official criteria for being severely stressed, that is spending a third of their income just keeping a roof over their heads. This is unacceptable at a time when so many students do not have adequate schools. Even the physical plants are dilapidated and falling apart. Teachers are not paid adequately. Their staff is not paid adequately. And there are huge disparities across wealthy communities versus poor communities. And the reality of America now is that we're mostly poor communities. We have a 5, 10, maybe 15%, which are doing very, very well. And the stock market is doing very, very well. But most of those investments are at the upper end of the income spectrum. Most Americans right now are struggling. They don't understand so-called Bidenomics and the achievements of Bidenomics. Most Americans are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. 87 million Americans do not have adequate health care. They can't afford health insurance, and they have either no health care or incomplete health care. There are 44 million young people who are locked in student debt with no prospects of getting out. 100 million Americans who are locked into medical debt. Child poverty, which has doubled. Homelessness rates are sky high. It's the highest on record. And we have a generation of young people who, according to polls, according to a Harvard study done last year, half of young people describe themselves as hopeless about the future, in part because of the climate crisis, which has been neglected, not just by Republicans. Although Democrats talk a good game, the reality is, you know, you heard about the Nord Stream pipeline that got blown up. Does that ring a bell to people? You know, the worst environmental sabotage ever in the world's history, the largest release of methane, which is the most destructive greenhouse gas. That was either undertaken by Joe Biden himself or he gave approval. And there's a variety of evidence for that, but the biggest evidence is that they have refused to investigate it and have blocked investigations, which is a pretty incriminating piece of data itself. But what that blow-up did was create a huge market. And in fact, you had, I think it was Anthony Blinken, a thank you, the Secretary of State saying, you know, congratulating everyone that we had this, thank you, we now have this huge market opening up. So to make a long story short, that huge new market for American fossil fuels has led to the development of 22 new export facilities for liquid natural gas, which is methane. These 22 facilities, according to the Sierra Club, not in extreme climate justice, we will have that coalition that will be working together to prevail. Until we do, we will make this happen and work together to do so. Thank you so much. Let me open this up.